Welcome back. We're here in the studio with Lorraine and with Shay, and we're going to explore a concept that Michael Porter referred to as one that CEOs that want to do the big pivot should look at: social entrepreneurship. And he says, look at the social entrepreneurs, how they are able to create shared value so that you as CEOs of traditional corporations can do better in terms of creating shared value, doing what the commitments are that the Business Roundtable says are the commitments for anybody that's a corporate leader, and adhere to basically what Larry Fink is saying: create and serve a higher purpose than just profit. Okay, so let's start out with just the concept of social entrepreneurship. What does it mean to you when you hear social entrepreneurship?
Well, entrepreneurship in general, separate from social entrepreneurship, I think is really just doing things on your own, and I guess reaching a goal that you have set in your own mind rather than, I guess, what society or what the economic environment has set for you. That's what I think entrepreneurship is. And the social entrepreneurship, I think, is just stepping out of your comfort zone and sort of just helping the greater good. So it's not altruistic in terms of like, I'm just gonna just help people and not expect anything in return. I believe that it's kind of like mutually beneficial towards the organization itself, performing the social action, and who they're helping. So just helping others in terms of just being mutually beneficial. That's what I think.
All right. What does resonate with you?
I agree. I agree completely. Exactly what Lorraine said there. Social entrepreneur, I think, if you're going to start, any company that's going to start a business with that in mind, I think, the whole purpose is to tackle or I guess create a business to basically implement solutions that will address social or environmental issues. So like you said, like for the greater good and things of that, the whole purpose is pretty much just to find solutions for the greater good of, social issues or entrepreneurship, environmental issues.
So there are a couple ways we can take this conversation where you sort of point to is, okay, these are sort of enlightened altruists or enlightened egoists in a way. They're serving themselves and society in a way that's meaningful, right? They're solving problems that are relevant to society and to people themselves, yeah? How then, if that were the case, what's different about social entrepreneurs versus the traditional NGO, the traditional nonprofit, or even the government? Why would we have a different concept here?
That's a very good question.
It is a really good question.
I never really, honestly, I always associate the two. They're very similar, NGOs as well as social entrepreneurship. So I don't really know. I've never really distinguished the difference between the two. So that's a really good question. I'm not too sure.
I'm not sure either. I mean, other than maybe just going back to what I said before, that a social entrepreneurship, since they're in their own lane, supposed to be creating value in their own way, they don't have to necessarily follow the strict procedures and policies and guidelines that NGOs have to. I don't know, that's the kind of what came to mind. Like NGOs, they have to go through a formal process and do this, but I'm creating my own company, I don't want to have to go through those procedures, but I still want to help. So that's my idea.
Okay. Well, let's stay with that, because I think it's important to understand, because these concepts exist for a point, okay? And the point here is to understand what can we learn from social entrepreneurs if people like Porter and others are saying this is important for CEOs to learn from, right? Because you could say, let's just learn from the government. Let's just learn from the president, or let's just learn from NGO leaders like the ones that are in the Red Cross or the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, etc. He's not saying that, right? Why do you think he's not saying learn from political leaders, study NGO leaders?
Well, I think for me, I guess it's because, like you mentioned before, NGOs usually have to work within a guideline. So I feel like he doesn't want CEOs to be kind of in the mindset of being limited to within these guidelines, to kind of think outside the box and get more creative, and just move with a bigger purpose. So I think that's the main reason why he's saying not to focus on that?
I think a lot of the case studies that we read were, I just lost my train of thought. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so I mean, it's. I think what I'm trying to get at, there are governmental leaders that serve the higher good, right? There are NGO leaders, as you're referring to. They are stating that they're serving or solving a social problem, right? And then there are the social entrepreneurs. So where and how would they fit in? Because
I believe, well, even, I guess the government as a whole, I guess I kind of view it still as like the big business, big brother type of thing. So I still feel like they don't have the same mission and goals as a social entrepreneur would. So even though an NGO might not, they may be a not-for-profit, but they still, I guess they're still working under the government, so they still have those guidelines, or they still have to meet expectations. I think that still have that homo economicus type of view or type of background, rather than a social entrepreneur. They will be able to keep that homo sapien value and that their view all the way through.
So when we're talking about nonprofit leaders, etc., what are they doing? Why are they nonprofit? What are these organizations that we're talking about? What is a nonprofit that you think of?
A nonprofit I think of, I like the social issue of just homelessness. So they provide housing, resources, food, in order to, I guess, set up a person to just live their life in a more stable way. But I mean, they take donations. I mean, the people they get paid, they don't get paid very well. But
So why would they not classify or qualify as social entrepreneurs?
That's a good question.
Saying in some way, you say they are not considered that innovative, right? They may sort of cater through whatever the government guidelines in some way, the law. Do social entrepreneurs not have to follow the law?
I think they have more flexibility as far as how innovative and creative they can get. I think with NGOs, I think it's more so, you know, yes, they're not working, it's nonprofit, but, you know, obviously they get, you know, they get some type of compensation from the government. So because of that, I think they're not really incentivized to be creative, right? To think outside the box, because it's kind of like, you know, we're serving our purpose, we're getting compensated for that, and let's just stay within that limit. With social entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurship rather, I think because it's not their main purpose of creating or founding whatever, you know, company or foundation it is to serve the people, to serve social issues, to serve environmental issues. And so they're not really, they can, you know, partner with, you know, the government, things of that sort, but they're not subjected to just what the guidelines of, you know, of an NGO. So I think because of that, you know, as I mentioned before, they have more flexibility and more, and to be I guess the space to be more creative and think outside the box. And so, yeah, I think that would be the difference between the two, yeah.
Okay. Well, let me try to help you in some way how we can see the difference there. One, I think you're sort of touching on is the social entrepreneur typically is trying to solve a problem. NGOs, the way we know them, oftentimes benefit from not solving the problem, but just managing the problem. Because if an organization exists, it sometimes gets into the mindset of wanting to be around and staying there. In fact, we see that many of the largest NGOs have been the same for over 100 years. And of course, social problems don't necessarily all go away. But the intention of a social entrepreneur is to basically put himself or herself out of business. Solve the problem. There's no need for that organization anymore. Whereas many of the NGOs that we sort of typically see, not all of them, have an understanding of they need to be around. We are good if we raise a lot of funds and if we basically sort of keep the problem managed, but it shouldn't go away, right? Because if it's gone, we have no reason for existence.
I think that goes back to what is it, your bagel, and then versus the traditional way of thinking. And a lot of I think it was the Grumman case study in specific. And a lot of the banks that he went to were like, you can't give loans to people who are poor, they won't be able to pay them back. And he kept asking them, why are you saying that? You're not even giving them a chance. Like, and then I think he brought that kind of changed the way of thinking, that pivot there, that like, yeah, I'm not just trying to just give them money so they can give me money and then I can just keep making money. It's, I don't want them to be in that position anymore. So I thought that was important. That's a good note.
And there's another a twist to that. It's like oftentimes people say you depend on donations in the NGO sector, right? And that's not quite true. Many NGOs are actually, or nonprofit organizations are actually using the market. Okay, they ask for payments for services and products, the social entrepreneur basically oftentimes is understood as one that uses the market to a certain end. Okay, so that there is a payment of some sort. Like in the banking example you bring in, yes, it's not like a donation, I give away a charity in that traditional sense. It's more like we're all participants in this exchange in the market. Okay, so that's one side. That's why I think this is helpful potentially to use as a concept: social entrepreneurship versus traditional philanthropy versus traditional charity or nonprofits. The other pieces in terms of entrepreneurs, we touched on that, right? It's Bill Gates, Henry Ford are entrepreneurs, right? Why are they not social entrepreneurs? Or are they?
That's a hard one. Can I say both? I don't know,
Why would you say both? Why would you say both?
I feel like I should be able to give specific examples, but some of these people have foundations. Well, I guess that serves more of like a purpose of an NGO type of thing. They're just kind of giving a donation rather than not wanting the problem to be solved. But they do have but that doesn't make them a social entrepreneur. That just makes them an entrepreneur. So I go back. I just think they're entrepreneurs now.
Okay. What about you?
I agree. I think they're more so entrepreneurs because, again, their purpose. The purpose. I think that really tells a lot about a company, and for them, it's profit. But what they're using that profit essentially for to do bigger things and things that help in social issues, environmental issues. That's why. And initially when you said they could be both, it's because they're using that profit to then, do bigger and greater things. So you could consider them to be both. I don't know. That's a very interesting, I'm not too sure.
That he just outlined, separated NGOs from social entrepreneurship. I'm like, they're more just like, I'm just going to give money to help pay for this. I don't care if it's necessarily gone.
Yeah.
But I'm just, here's some money.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not too sure.
It's interesting because there is this dichotomy in our cultural narrative. It's like either you make money or you do good, right? And so you have that even installed in a legal system where it's like, okay, there's a for-profit maximizing business that Bill Gates can start, that Henry Ford can start, right? And then there is the foundation and a charity that does good. And then we talk about it as giving back, as if those two couldn't coexist, right? For social entrepreneurs, that coexists, right? For the current traditional setup, it's more like this either or. We even have a name for it, the second sector and the third sector, right? And so there is actually a talk about an emergent fourth sector that does combine the ambition to sort of solve global social environmental problems with financial sustainably. And that's what a social entrepreneur aims to do, right? That they have the highest level impact and they use profit as a means, not as an end, right? They use the profitability of their services and the products that they create to create more solutions, to spread more of the good that they can produce, right?
I think there's this kind of like, I've heard of like something called like a dual bottom line. So in my head, the way I read it, it was like you could be corporately or like socially responsible, or you could just optimize like your profit, make it the highest as possible. So the view of bringing them together, I think a lot of in my readings, the issue that I come across is trying to put a value on helping people. How do you like you can put
Measure that.
I made, how you measure this? I
Mhm.
made this much money, and this is the impact. We
Right.
have this, but
Mhm.
I help these people. So how has this? How do we?
That's
put
a
this
big
here?
question, right? It's
Yeah.
like, how do you measure impact, right? It's seemingly easy to measure profit now. By the way, most people didn't know how to do this for a long time, right? And the whole accounting system was a relatively recent invention. So it's not like so clear cut in terms of what matters as profit, right? Creative bookkeeping reminds you Enron didn't have many profits, right? Most of the startups are not profitable in some way, and we find a way to sort of say yes, they could be, right? And it's sort of like also just more an art than a science. And the same thing in context of the environmental and the social dimension, right? There are triple bottom lines, there's talk about integrated bottom lines. And I think the main point here that social entrepreneurs are using, or that may be helpful to just unearth a different way of looking at the world, is that business and society are always connected, right? There used to be this thought, that's what Michael Porter also says, that whatever is good for business is good for society. Whatever is profitable must be good for society, for social causes, and for environmental causes. Right? And I think that is shifting and has been shifting, and that's what is a reflection in this business roundtable statement. It's like, no. What's good for society needs to be good for business. Okay, so what's good for society is what business does. And that's what the social entrepreneur does, right? They look at what are the environmental problems, what are the social problems, and let's figure out a way how to solve these problems profitably. Not the other way around, which is the current corporate entrepreneurial kind of mindset where it's like, okay, let me find a way that's profitable, and let's sort of then see what's also socially good, maybe give some money away, and then reduce our impacts on the environment, right? But at best, it gets you to less bad. From the intention, from the design on, it's a different setup, right? It's a different mindset. And I'm going to bring in my friends again. This is the one of the traditional entrepreneurial mindset or the corporate mindset. Maximization of financial impact is what matters. Whereas the social entrepreneur is sort of looking at this. These are the opportunities. This is the opportunity space. I want to get into it, okay? I want to sort of remove the constraints on the planetary boundaries, okay? And I want to elevate people above the dignity threshold internally. And then we are all in a better, safer space of operating as humanity, right? A space of thriving. So the intention is different. It's like, the solar system. When people used to look at it, they thought Earth is the center, right? And the sun is rotating around the Earth. So both exist. The Earth is there, the planet Earth is there, sun is there. Profit as the Earth, right, is not the center. It's important, yet it rotates around the social purpose, the sun, right? And the environmental purpose, that bigger thing. That's the switch, that's the big pivot, okay? And social entrepreneurs are able to do that. So I want to give you just a couple criteria. They're purpose-driven. They have these global, social, systemic problems in mind. They want to solve those problems, right? They don't want to ameliorate or make less bad happen, but they want to solve these problems. They want to put themselves out of business. And they do so where the market is not yet that developed and where the government isn't really finding any solutions. Okay, so climate change, for example, is both a market failure and a government failure. So if you can create solutions here, like Tesla possibly did, it's like, okay, well, this is where they create a market. This is where they create even a sort of ecosystem where maybe the government can help then, and the transition towards low carbon emission transportation can occur, right? But this is really on the margin. And you could say Tesla and Elon Musk might be social entrepreneurs because they really try to solve these larger, bigger problems, and they're sort of trying to make it financially viable so that they have the biggest impact possible. So the impact of it is what drives social entrepreneurs in some way, right? Okay, I thank you for that exploration. You students, you hear a little bit more about social entrepreneurs and the definition in a moment. And then we're going to come back here to you, and we're going to discuss what we as CEOs and students, what you as CEOs of the company that you have chosen can learn and take away from these specific social entrepreneurs that we will study. And hopefully you can apply that in the context of the organization that you have chosen to be the CEO of.